Hello friends, welcome back to VOWIAS. Welcome to this session on Vision Economy PT365 and this is part 4 of the lecture series. So now let's continue from where we left last time. But before that, I would just like to tell you that we are providing summaries of PT365, the Vision Prelims Test Series, etc. You can just visit our Telegram channel where you will get more information about this. So we have ensured that we summarize the PT365 to the maximum extent. The Vision PT365 of economy has about 100 pages and we have summarized to about 46 pages. So this, our main intention is to make your preparation easy. So it makes things easy for your preparation because already you're very much stressed in this preparation time. So we just want to ensure that things become easy for you so that you will be able to revise multiple times and give your best in the exam. Now let's begin with the lecture. First, what we have is the priority sector lending guidelines. So priority sector basically are those sectors where there will be priority, or you can say the banks will have a mandate, or the banks have to guaranteedly every year have to give some amount to these sectors as loans. So the RBI mandated that 40% of what the bank 40% of the adjusted net bank rate of the bank has to be given to this priority sectors. Now what are these priority sectors? If you see agriculture, MSME, export credit, education, housing, social infrastructure, renewable energy. So all these sectors, if you see, they involve the weaker sections and also they are very important for the economy. So these sectors are classified as the priority sectors because normally the banks will not be, the banks don't want to lend to these sectors because if you see the other sectors, they will be giving the banks higher interest. And also the banks have the guarantee that these other sectors they will definitely return, but there is a risk involved if the bank lend money to these sectors, because if you see agriculture or MSME, there is always a risk that the money will not be returned to the bank because they depend on a lot of other factors, and these agriculture, MSME and other sectors, they are not much developed in India at this moment. So in order to ensure that these sectors also get some loans, the government introduced these priority sector guidelines. So if you see the priority sector guidelines and important features, one important feature is that the RRB Cooperative and Small Finance Bank, they allocate 75% of their adjusted net bank credit. Now what do you understand by this adjusted net bank credit? So this adjusted net bank credit, if you see, it is nothing but the total loans what the bank give, the total loans plus the total investments what the bank do. Okay, so the loans basically are the what the bank is giving to the customers, and investment is what the bank is investing. For example, the bank will be investing either in shares of a company or the bonds of the government or other things. So they are the investments of the bank. So the 40% of the loans plus investment is nothing but the adjusted. So basically 40% of this loans plus investment is nothing but 40% of adjusted net bank credit. So now I think you understood what is this adjusted net bank credit. Now let's move on to the next thing. So next, another important information given is about the Rural Infrastructure Development Fund. So if there is any shortfall in the PSL target, if there is any bank which is not able to meet this PSL target, then what they will do is they will deposit this money that is remaining, or they will actually deposit this difference of what they have given and what is their target. That difference they will deposit with this Rural Infrastructure Development Fund with NABARD, and this money NABARD will be using for the priority sectors only. Okay, so this is about the Rural Infrastructure Development Fund, and remember it will be with the NABARD. Now if you see, there are few changes that the RBI has introduced in this PSL, and they are according to the UK Sinha Committee and MK Jain Internal Working Group. Remember these two names, UK Sinha and MK Jain committees. So these are mainly for the priority sector lending guidelines. So there are fresh categories that were introduced in the priority sectors according to the recent changes and trends. Now these sectors are the startups, because these days you are talking about the Atmanirbhar Bharat, Make in India and other initiatives. So for this we have to promote the startups and all. So इसीलिए we have included this startups up to 50 crore finance. They can be included in the priority sector. Next, the installation of solar power plants by the farmers. This also can be included in the priority sector, and the compressed biogas plants. So if someone wants to set up these compressed biogas plants, it will also come under the priority sector. Okay, and So rest of the things I've just given here, you can just pause and go through these things. These are not much important. So what are important, I've just covered. Okay, the renewable energy loan limit doubled. So all of these things are there. But from the examination point of view, these things, the fresh categories, these are very important for us. Now let's go to the next thing. Next is the priority sector lending certificates. The priority lending certificates, if you see, they are nothing but, let's say there is a bank A and bank B. So bank A has given 50% of their adjusted net bank credit to the priority sectors. But bank B, if you see, they gave only 30% of their adjusted net bank credit to the priority sector. They have to fulfill their remaining 10% target. Now what they will do, they will go to this bank A, and this bank A, as they have given 10% extra, they have given 10% extra as loans to the priority sectors, they will convert this extra 10% into a certificate called the priority sector lending certificate, and this will be sold to the bank B. The bank A will then sell this extra 10% to the bank A, so because the bank B also has to fulfill the guidelines. So the bank B will go and purchase this certificate, and इसको बोलते हैं priority sector lending certificate. But here remember this important thing, the bank A is just selling the loan. That means they are just giving the money as a certificate, but the liability of the loan will be there with the bank A only and not with the bank B. So bank A will have the liability, right? Now let's go to the next news. So next is about the small finance bank. So small finance bank, recently why it was in news is because RBI has given guidelines. RBI said that the small finance bank whose capital has reached 500 crore has to be listed in the stock market within 3 years. So this is the deadline that RBI has kept. Within 3 years, these small finance banks, they have to get listed in the stock market. Now there is a difference given between the payment bank and small finance bank. So payment bank, if you see, these are generally the banking institutions established by the technology companies, because technology is the key thing in the payment banks. But if you see small finance bank, these are basically small banks in short words, and these are generally established by the professionals who have 10 years of experience in the banking sector. The payment banks, if you see, for them the minimum capital is 100 crore, whereas it is different for the small finance bank. And also for the payment banks, 75% of the deposit has to be deposited with the government as bonds, and 25% has to be deposited with the other banks. Okay, and 26% investment has to be by the Indians in these payment banks. This is different from the small finance bank, where 75% of loans will be given to the priority sector by the small finance bank. Even it is same with the regional rural banks also. Okay, and another important thing is that we have to understand the differences, where this payment bank, they will not be able to offer credit card or they give loans. But if you see these small finance banks, they can offer loans as well as the credit cards. But the thing is that they cannot extend large loans and create subsidiaries. And another important thing with the payment bank is that they can accept a maximum deposit of 1 lakh only. There is this limit, there is this cap of 1 lakh for the payment banks. And also they cannot they have to handle they cannot handle the remittances, and they cannot accept NRI deposits. So these are the important things with the payment bank. But this is different from the small finance bank. Small finance bank basically are banks but small in size. That is the major difference, you can say, and they have some guidelines which they have to follow. So these small finance bank, basically they are established after the suggestion proposed by the Nechikath Moore Committee of RBI in 2014. And some of the examples, if you see, with Jeevan Small Finance Bank, the Jana Lakshmi Small Finance Bank, these are some of the examples. Now let's go to the next information. So next one is about the restructuring, recovery and management of stressed assets. If you see stressed assets, they are basically nothing but the assets, or you can say the loans which have turned into a stressed asset. That means the NPAs or the SMA1 or something like that. Okay, so that means if the bank is not able to recover the loans which they gave, इसको हम बोलते हैं a stressed asset. So for the resolution of these stressed assets, what the bank has done is, or you can say what the government has done is, they have introduced various schemes like the SARFAESI Act of 2002, the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code, the asset reconstruction companies, the bad banks. So all of these different ideas came up, and the government has actually passed several laws in order to ensure that the resolution process carries on. Now what are these important things and what are the changes, we will see. If you see, basically the SARFAESI Act, why it was in news is because recently Supreme Court said that the cooperative banks now they can use the SARFAESI Act in order to recover their dues. So till now cooperative banks were not able to use this because if you see the cooperative banks, they are guided or they are governed by the state laws. Cooperative banks are generally governed by the state laws or the multi-state laws. Okay, so that is the reason as they are governed by state cooperative or multi-state cooperative laws, they don't come under the purview of RBI. So they will not be able to use, till now they are not able to use this SARFAESI Act, but from now they will be able to use the SARFAESI Act also. Okay, so if you see the SARFAESI Act, basically it is to ensure that the reconstruction of the stressed asset happen. So reconstruction का मतलब ये है कि turning the stressed asset into a profitable asset and liquidating that asset so that the borrower, or you can say the lender who has lent the money, he can recover his dues. That is the main aim. There will be these asset reconstruction companies that will be established under the SARFAESI Act, and these asset reconstruction companies, what they will do is they will try to turn this business into a profitable venture. Now the next news is so these are the other provisions of the SARFAESI Act and all. As this is an old law, this is not much important for the exam, but here I have given, just pause and go through it once. If you have any doubt, just leave a comment in the comment box and we will get back to you very soon. Now let's move on to the next thing. Next thing is about the suspension of Insolvency Bankruptcy Code. So it was suspended recently for some time because of the COVID pandemic. A lot of businesses have turned, or there were a lot of business companies, they have become NPS. The loans which were given to these companies have become NPS because as the COVID-19 pandemic came, there were lockdowns and other things, and because of these lockdowns and other things, what happened is the business has collapsed. As the business has collapsed, they are not in a great position to return the loans to the banks. So इसीलिए for a temporary period this Insolvency Bankruptcy Code was suspended. So Insolvency Bankruptcy Code, if you see, it's a great initiative by India. It's a great initiative because it will help the banks to recover their dues timely. Because if there are a lot of NPAs in the banking sector, then this will be a stress on the banks, because the banks will not get any returns and the banks will not be able to give further money as loans, and also there is always a risk because these businesses are not giving the money. So there is a risk there is a risk in the economy increases, and the banks might fail also because of the high NPAs, right? So these are the important features of the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code. You can just go through this. You can just pause the video and go through this, as we are not going to discuss these in detail because it's an old law, it's an old code only, and there is always a less chance that these things can be asked in the exam, but these are also self-understandable. Now what we will look at is the difference between the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code and the SARFAESI Act. So basically Insolvency Bankruptcy Code was introduced recently because there are a lot of issues with this SARFAESI Act. In order to resolve these issues of the SARFAESI Act, we have introduced this Insolvency Bankruptcy Code. So Insolvency Bankruptcy Code, if you see, it covers both secured and the unsecured creditors. Now what do you mean by secured and the unsecured creditors? So secured creditors, basically, if you see, for example, there is this company A and it has taken loans from a bank, and it has taken loan from a big creditor, okay, like an NBFC or any other big creditor. So when the bank or any creditor, if they give loans to this company A, what they will do, they will keep some, or they will actually secure these loans with the help of an asset. They will secure these loans with the help of an asset. इसको बोलते हैं, if the loan is backed by an asset, इसको बोलते हैं a secured loan. And what is unsecured? Unsecured means something, for example, the company A actually issued bonds, and because of the trust what this company has, a lot of people will be purchasing these bonds, etc. So that means these people also have invested in the company, but the thing is that their loans or their bonds are not backed by any asset. They are just based on the trust of the company. So they are unsecured creditors. Now under the SARFAESI Act, these secured creditors will be given highest priority, and only all these acts talk about the secured creditors only initially, but the unsecured creditors also are very important because they are just normal people like you and me, and if they lose their money, then this will have a huge impact on the economy also. So that is the reason we have introduced this Insolvency Bankruptcy Code, and this Insolvency Bankruptcy Code take precedence over the SARFAESI Act. remember this. Okay, and the powers under the SARFAESI Act are some restricted, and this Insolvency Bankruptcy Code will ensure that it has a certain timeline where the proceedings has to be carried on timely, and the asset has to be turned profitable, or it has to be resolved timely. There is a certain timeline which was given under the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code. So, and also there are separate jurisdictions for LLP and individuals. The NCLT, National Company Law Tribunal, is basically for the companies and the LLPs, and the Debt Recovery Tribunal basically is for the individuals. But if you see in the SARFAESI, you have only the Debt Recovery Tribunal, and this will adjudicate both the companies as well as the individuals. So here if you see, there is a lot of burden on the Debt Recovery Tribunal, but here if you see, the burden is shifted among the Debt Recovery Tribunal and the NCLT. Okay, so these are the advantages of and some differences between the IBC, that is the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code, and the SARFAESI Act. Now let's move on to the next information, next news. It's about the provisioning of loans. Now what is this concept of provisioning of loans? Let's take last year what happened. We had lockdowns because of the COVID-19, and because of these lockdowns, lot of businesses, they have suffered, and they have turned into NPAs. Their loans have turned into NPAs because the 3 months they were not able to do any business. They are not generating any income. So that is the reason they were not able to pay the loans, not able to pay the interest as well as the principal. Okay, so that is the reason the RBI has introduced this provisioning of loans concept, where these provisioning will be done to these loans which has turned NPA because of the pandemic. Okay, because of the pandemic, if they have turned NPA, then those loans will be provisioned. That means these businesses, they will be given some extra loan, or some amount of some profit of the bank, it will be kept aside. Okay, now why this will be done? Either the bank has to give some extra loan, or they have to keep some of the profit aside. Why this has to be done? This has to be done because if you see, the bank also will have a lot of commitments. To fulfill. They have to give loans, they have to take care of the expenses and everything, and also they have to pay the interest to the customers. All these things have to be done by the banks. So if the bank don't show the return, or if the bank don't get any return from the business, then what is going to happen? The bank is going to collapse. So इसीलिए, in order to ensure that these things does not happen and the bank also fulfill its commitments, either some extra loan will be given to this business so that some income can be generated, or some of the profit the bank will keep aside and use these profits for the commitments, or the bank will keep aside in order to ensure that the risk is averted. Okay, this will be done by the banks. This is called provisioning of loans. So RBI said that the businesses who have went into losses, so from the last year April, during the lockdown and all, the business which have actually gone into losses, they can be provisioned under this special provisioning of loans. Okay, so RBI stipulated in April that lending institutions make 10% provisioning, that is 5% phased over 2 quarters. So these are the guidelines given by RBI. These are not much needed from the exam point of view also, because in exam, if you see, the focus is mostly on the analytical part. Okay, so under this special provisioning, banks set aside the funds and the earnings, which we have seen already, and RBI also clarified that the provisioning will be considered only for loans which are categorized as SMA2 at the start of moratorium period. Okay, so now what is this SMA2? Only for this SMA2 category this will be applicable. So SMA2 means if there is any interest or payment due for about 90 days. Okay, if interest or payment is not paid for about 30 days, इसको बोलते हैं SMA0. If it is not paid for about 60 days, इसको बोलते हैं SMA1. If it is not paid up till 90 days, इसको बोलते हैं SMA2, and after 90 days it will turn into NPA. Okay, for more than 90 days, if there is any due, इसको बोलते हैं हम NPA. Now if this NPA will be there for about 12 months, then this will be called as a substandard asset. If this substandard asset will be there for another 12 months, that means the NPA is there for about 24 months. इसको बोलते हैं हम doubtful asset. Okay, and after that, if the if the bank decides, if the auditor of the bank and other important people of the bank, the top management decides that they are not going to get any return, they will not be able to recover anything, then the asset will go into a loss asset. It will become a loss asset because the bank will not be able to recover. Okay? So these are the various classifications, asset classifications. Now let's move on to the next information. So next, the thing is given about the regulation of NBFCs. So RBI proposed a shift in the NBFC regulatory approach, because if you see recent times, the NBFCs have faced various issues which we have discussed already in the previous video. Because the NBFCs are very important for the economy. The NBFCs will actually give long-term loans to various infrastructure projects and various important needs. The banks will be given loans just for the short term. The banks will generally give short-term loans only. But these NBFCs, they will give long-term loans, and also they will give very huge loans. Okay, so these huge loans and long-term loans are important, especially important for the infrastructure projects. But now what is the difficulty? The difficulty is that there is a asset liability mismatch, which we have discussed already. Okay, to remove all of these things and also to ensure that the RBI will have more control over NBFCs, RBI has suggested various regulatory changes. So the NBFCs are nothing but these are large companies registered under the Companies Act. So remember, NBFCs are not registered under the Banking Act, but they are registered under the Companies Act. Okay, and they will be giving loans and other things. But the important difference from the banks is that these NBFCs, they will not be able to recover, or you can say they will not be able to accept any deposit, and also they cannot give any checks. Okay, so they will not be accepting any deposits, but they will be accepting money from the public and other big investors in the form of bonds, right? So if you see some of the other things, the NBFCs basically are regulated in various ways. Some NBFCs are regulated by the RBI. Some NBFCs, like the housing finance institutions, they are initially regulated by National Housing Bank, but now they are regulated by the RBI only from 2019. And the merchant banks, etc., the venture capital funds, etc., are regulated by the SEBI, and the Nidhi companies are regulated by MCA, and the chit fund companies, they are regulated by the state government. Okay? These are the important things. And also some of the other companies or other important NBFCs, they are regulated by RBI directly also. Okay? So these are the important things. So, and what are the changes now RBI is proposing? So RBI is proposing for greater regulation if there is higher risk. So there are few NBFCs which were not able to recover dues, and also there are a lot of risks involved. So when the risk increases, then the RBI regulation also increases. So degree of regulation depends on the proportion of risk. Okay, so if the company has greater risk, then the regulation of RBI will increase over these companies. This is the major change that RBI has proposed. So RBI has done another important thing. Under the Atmanirbhar Bharat, the government actually, what it has done is, it has introduced this special liquidity scheme for the NBFCs and HFCs. I told you already, there is a asset liability mismatch. इसका मतलब ये है कि the NBFCs will give long-term loans, but actually the bonds which the NBFCs will issue, for the money, for the income, or you can say for the money which they have to lend. Okay, so these will be issued as short-term ones. So their liability is short-term, but their income is long-term. So these are two different things. There is a complete mismatch. So for this, to ensure that this will not happen, and to ensure to avert this risk, RBI has actually announced this special liquidity scheme, where a special purpose vehicle will be created. And this special purpose vehicle, what it will do is, it will purchase these short-term bonds, these short-term liabilities from the NBFCs up to 30,000 crores. Okay, these short-term liabilities will be purchased. Okay, so that these NBFCs, they will not have that risk. Okay, they can actually diversify this risk. So this was the scheme introduced, and under this there is some eligibility criteria given to the NBFCs and HFCs, where their NPA has to be less than 6%, and they have to show their profits at least in one of the last 2 financial years, and they should not be reported under SMA 1 or SMA 2 category. So if these criteria are fulfilled, then they can use this special liquidity scheme, where a special purpose vehicle is created which will purchase all these short-term liabilities. Okay? Now let's move on to the next thing, where some of the measures which are taken by the RBI are also given, where this emergency credit line of guarantee scheme was introduced. Under this emergency credit line guarantee scheme, up to 3 lakh crores Okay, additional funds of 3 lakh crores are provided for the loans to MSMEs and the Mudra borrowers. So this was there. This is the main important thing, because these MSMEs, they are not getting funds, and because of that, and also because of the pandemic, they have gone into losses. So in order to bring back their business, in order to revive their business, they need some investments and loans. So for this only this was created. And another important thing what we have to look at is the housing finance companies. So these housing finance companies are also registered under the Companies Act. So HFCs, the housing finance companies, as well as the non-banking finance companies, both of these are registered by the Companies Act only. Okay, and the housing finance companies are now regulated by the RBI, which we have discussed already. Well, let's go to the next thing. Yeah, so we will end here. So next we will continue the next important things from the next lecture. Okay, till then keep studying and stay tuned to VOWIAS. Thank you. Jai Hind.